If you've heard someone call themselves realistic right before saying something that was actually just bleak. If no compliment reaches you anymore, without some part of your brain quietly asking what they actually want. If being pleasantly surprised by a stranger has started to feel like the unusual outcome instead of the normal one. Welcome. What feels like clear sight is often something else entirely. Or maybe you know someone like this. The friend who assumes a hidden motive behind every generous gesture. The coworker who's been saying nothing here ever actually changes for so long, it's basically become the office weather report. The person who reads betrayal into a situation that was really just a scheduling mix-up. Here's the first thing worth knowing, and it cuts right at the heart of how cynicism defends itself. Psychologists call it naive realism, the belief that you're simply seeing the world as it actually is, while everyone else is the one filtering reality through bias. Almost everybody believes some version of this about themselves. For a cynical person, it shows up as a very specific certainty. I'm not negative, I'm just realistic. The word itself has drifted a long way from where it started, too. The original cynics in ancient Greece, Diogenes among them, weren't distrustful pessimists at all. They rejected wealth and status in pursuit of virtue. Somewhere over the centuries, the word quietly swapped meanings, from rejecting convention to expecting the worst from people, and most people using it today have no idea they inherited the second version. Here's the twist that undercuts the whole premise, and it's worth sitting with. You'd assume someone who expects to be lied to would be better at catching a lie. Research says otherwise. Cynical people aren't meaningfully better lie detectors than anyone else. And in a lot of cases they're worse, because assuming everyone is dishonest tends to produce more false accusations than accurate catches. The suspicion doesn't sharpen the radar, it just lowers the bar for what counts as a hit. Part of why this worldview holds together so well is that it tends to build its own evidence. Assume a stranger is going to be dishonest and you show up guarded, distant, a little cold before anything's even happened. People generally respond to that energy with less warmth of their own, which then gets read as proof the assumption was right all along. Psychologists call this an expectancy effect, and it's less like discovering the truth about people and more like quietly manufacturing it. Behavioral economists have actually tested the alternative directly. In something called the trust game, one stranger gets money and decides how much to send to a second stranger, knowing it'll multiply, and then the second person decides how much to send back. Across many versions of this experiment, people consistently send and return more than pure self-interest would predict. Cooperation keeps showing up even when nobody's watching, and nothing forces it to. There's also a reason spotting hypocrisy or selfishness can feel oddly satisfying instead of just grim. Confirmation of an existing belief is its own small reward, and dark humor runs almost entirely on that mechanism. A joke landing exactly because it validates a worldview that already expected the punchline. So why would a mind default to this in the first place? Evolutionary psychologists point to a fairly blunt piece of old math. Distrusting one honest stranger cost almost nothing in a dangerous, resource-scarce environment. Trusting one dangerous stranger could get you killed. That kind of asymmetry favored erring toward suspicion, and humans likely evolved a specific mental system for spotting people who break social rules. A cheater detector that's just quietly always running in the background for everyone. Cynicism isn't having that system. It's leaving the sensitivity turned all the way up long after the original danger stopped matching the current one. There's a subtle drift that happens with this over time, too. Some people cheat is a reasonable, statistically grounded thought. Left running long enough, it quietly erodes into people cheat, full stop, with the nuance simply falling out of the sentence somewhere along the way. Now here's the part almost nobody expects, and it directly contradicts the exact intuition cynicism runs on. Researchers have run large-scale lost wallet experiments across many countries, dropping wallets with varying amounts of cash to see how many got returned. The cynical prediction is obvious. More money, more temptation, fewer returns. What actually happened was often the reverse. Wallets containing more money got returned more often than nearly empty ones. One leading explanation is that the more was at stake, the stronger people's sense of moral obligation became, not weaker. The exact situation built to prove cynicism right ended up disproving it in study after study. That blind spot isn't limited to lost wallets. Cynicism tends to overlook an enormous amount of quiet, ordinary cooperation. People returning things, following rules with no one watching, showing up for each other in small ways that never make the news, precisely because none of it is dramatic enough to report on. Scandals get coverage, reliability doesn't. Over time, that imbalance quietly warps the sample size a cynical brain is drawing its conclusions from. None of this comes free, either. Long-term studies have tied chronic cynical hostility to real physical costs, including higher cardiovascular risk, likely tangled up with the prolonged stress and interpersonal friction that comes with expecting the worst as a baseline. It also spreads socially in ways people rarely notice happening. A few repeated lines on a team, nothing ever changes here. Management doesn't care, and the sentiment becomes a shared assumption long before anyone questioned whether it was actually still true. And despite the common assumption that cynicism signals sharper intelligence, research doesn't back that link up. Smart people trust plenty. Cynical people get it wrong plenty. They're simply different dimensions of a person, not two ends of the same one. It's worth being fair here too. A calibrated amount of skepticism genuinely protects people from scams, manipulation, and misleading claims, and pretending otherwise would be its own kind of naivety. The problem was never having a filter. It's a filter stuck permanently on its highest setting, treating every stranger like the worst-case scenario just proved itself true before any actual evidence showed up. Interestingly, cynicism doesn't reliably trace back to some big betrayal either. The same hard experience can leave one person warier and another person more compassionate. The event isn't what decides the outcome nearly as much as how it gets interpreted afterward. The real cost shows up less as danger avoided and more as invitations quietly declined. Friendships that never fully form, mentors never approached, chances at real connection assumed to be a trick before they ever got the chance to prove otherwise. Communication researchers describe something called truth default theory, the idea that ordinary life only works because people generally assume honesty unless given a specific reason not to. Take that baseline away, and cooperation gets expensive fast. Diogenes reportedly wandered Athens in broad daylight, holding a lit lantern, claiming to be searching for one honest man. It's a good joke about human nature. It's an even better description of what cynicism actually does. Holding a light up to search for exactly the thing its own glare makes harder to see. Subscribe and watch this video next.